Okay. Well, as Robert mentioned, I'm sharing a few thoughts with you this morning, and I think this is something that we're going to try to offer Robert here and there. It's just an opportunity to not have to prepare a sermon. If you've never done it before, it takes a lot of work. I can now attest. So it's great to give Robert a break, and I know he mentioned that it's Regina and Robert's 25th wedding anniversary, and they are headed out of town this afternoon, so it was great to give him a chance to not have to prepare something for this morning. Meanwhile, I am loving the spring weather, and I know you are too. And I have this steep walk that I do up the road from our house. From my house to the top of Sinclair Road, it's a nice, get your heart pumping kind of steep terrain, and you get up to the top there, and it's just spectacular views. And the last little 200 yards or so are a dirt road that leads to the top of Wildcat, and there's a gate there. And that's where most people turn around and head back down. So one day it occurred to me, more often than not, I turn around right where the paved road turns to the dirt, and I don't make that last little stretch up there. And so, of course, when it dawned on me that I did this, I thought, well, what, is there some character flaw here? What's my problem? Why don't I go that last little stretch? And I started thinking, well, maybe it's like I lack follow-through. Maybe I just don't, go for that last little push on my goals. Am I lazy? And while the answer to all of those questions was probably yes, I actually think it's something a little less sinister, that I just lack intention. Like, it's just not my goal to go all the way to the top of Wildcat. I'm just on a walk, and that's okay. I think there are times in life where we're just sort of swimming in the current and everything goes along fine. And then there are other times in life that demand a little bit more of us. Sometimes things in life that actually kind of grip hold of us and say, hey, you need to be committed to this. You need to be committed to this. So my family and I just spent spring break up in Alaska, which is not where most people would choose to go on spring break, I realize. But we had a wedding to go to, which was awesome. And I thought, how appropriate that we just came from a wedding when here I am going to be speaking today about commitment. Because for sure, when we watched our niece take those very real, very tangible vows, it dawned on me again, it reminded me again, that marriages really demand total commitment, don't they? They really do. They don't work otherwise. So it kind of gave me a jump start on today's reading about Hannah, and I want to add a little context to that. What you didn't hear happens right before today's reading, and it's this. Hannah was unable to have children, and she'd really become hopeless and sad. And to make matters worse, her husband had another wife, which would make my matters a lot worse. But anyway, her husband had another wife who had loads of children. She had little kids running all around the house, and Hannah had none. And this other wife would tease Hannah and taunt her relentlessly, belittle her every chance she got for not providing children. And so Hannah was really becoming despondent about the fact that she was childless. And so one day she slipped into the temple to pray, and she prayed fervently for this child. She prayed so fervently that she promised God that she would give her child over to him completely if he would just grant her this one thing that she wanted. She prayed so passionately, in fact, that Eli the priest thought she was drunk and told her to go home. And so she was able to explain herself to Eli, and he actually blessed her. And soon after that, Hannah did become pregnant. She went on to have a child, Samuel, whom she gave to God. And later, Samuel became one of the great prophets of the Lord. So in the reading, the part that you did hear, you heard how Hannah made good on her commitment to God that she had made during that prayer. And she brought Samuel to be raised in the church. Now, it was probably customary at the time for mothers to nurse their children to toddlerhood, maybe age 3 or 4. And so when it says that after Hannah weaned him, that she gave him to Eli to be raised in the church, we can assume that the baby was about 3 or 4 years old when she brought him to the temple. Now think about that for just a second. 3 or 4 years old. I mean, she had longed to have this baby. She had longed to have a child. She had loved him, nurtured him, played with him, taught him, all the while living with that thought in her head that she had promised to give him up. I wonder if she had a constant battle in her heart and in her head about whether or not to honor that vow. She easily could have kept Samuel, and nobody but God would have known the difference. But she didn't. Hannah honored that vow, and she gave her little son to the Lord, just like she had promised. What an incredible example of integrity and faith. Can you imagine her pain as she walked away from the tabernacle, leaving her son behind? I wonder if he reached out his arms the way little kids do for his mom to pick him up. My heart sort of aches when I imagine her crying as she rode back to the tent that night, back to the other wife and all the other kids, empty-handed. Now, the story doesn't end there, of course. Samuel goes on to be a prophet of the Lord of unparalleled character and worth. And maybe it was in part because of his extraordinary example of his mother, I wonder. Hannah also goes on to have more sons and daughters, but it all started because of a promise that she made to God. It reminds me of the verse in 2 Chronicles, which is 16:9. For the eyes of the Lord scan the whole world to find those whose hearts are committed so that he can strengthen them. I love that. God is scanning the whole world to find those of us whose hearts are committed so that he can strengthen us and encourage us. But sometimes today, I think we're all a little bit commitment phobic. And I'm not just talking about marriage or the kinds of commitments that require us to really dig deep like Hannah did. I'm talking about, can we get our kids to piano lessons? I'm talking about, can we commit to going out with friends on a Friday night because something better might come along? I'm talking about a fear of commitment that keeps us from volunteering for community projects because it might be too much time spent. And then sometimes it's not just fear that holds us back, but simply a lack of desire. It's let somebody else sit on that nonprofit board. I don't have time for that. Let somebody else show up to the parent meeting tonight. Nobody's going to notice if I'm at yoga or CrossFit this week anyway. And perhaps even more insidious, I know I said I'd go on that hike with you, but something came up. I know I signed up for the 6-week class, but I can only make 2. I know I need to take this medication to feel better, but I just can't seem to remember. I know I said I'd give up sugar for Lent, but it's just so hard. I mean, we can barely keep the 10 commandments. How can we possibly expect it to meet you at Peaches for coffee and be on time? Commitments are hard for us. Interestingly enough, Webster's uses terms like this to characterize commitment: sacrifice, loss of freedom, submission, institutionalization, and consignment to a prison or mental hospital. Well, who in their right mind would want to do that? Those are horrible words to describe commitment. Although as I read through those just now, I was thinking they sound a little bit like the Air Force Academy, don't they, Nick? But commitment is a very interesting sort of complex, complicated mix of 4 really important things. And these are the 4 things: trust, intent, effort, and sacrifice. So trust has to do with believing that commitments can be kept. So I think about Hannah. She had to believe that she could keep up her end of the bargain and that all would be well. Intent has to do with formulating what is wanted. What is our intent? Hannah's intent was to have a child and raise it in the service of God. That was her intent, to be a vessel for another human being and to love it. She knew what her intent was. Effort is what it takes to carry through on the commitment. And in Hannah's case, that was simply a commitment she made to God nobody knew anything about, but think of the effort it took to get her son there and to follow through on that. And then sacrifice. Sacrifice is accepting that all commitments come with a price. Whether we're talking about choosing a sport in high school, choosing a major in college, whether we're talking about choosing a career or making a mid-career change or choosing a life partner, what we gain by commitment is always offset by the loss of other possibilities. Think about that for a second. What we gain by commitment is always offset by the loss of other possibilities. When our niece just got married up in Alaska, watching them take their vows, what an awesome commitment, what a gain for them. But it was offset by the possibility of ever dating anyone ever again, right? Our daughter, Anna Kate, just is she's a big basketball player. She's on the high school basketball team. And when the group of students went to Haiti a few weeks ago, she was gung-ho, ready to go. And she realized that the district tournament for the basketball team was the same week. So she had a decision to make. And ultimately, she decided that her commitment to her basketball team had come first, and she had to stick with that. But what a tough choice. Every commitment is offset by the loss of other possibilities. That's the sacrifice. And by the way, that's exactly what Jesus is demanding of us, is that kind of sacrifice. God asks for us to be fully committed to him. In fact, when I was a little girl, nothing in church scared me more than this. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father or mother, he cannot be my disciple. What? I was 5 years old going, that's pretty hard for me to comprehend. But that is exactly what Jesus says in the book of Luke. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father or mother, wife and children, brother or sister, he cannot be my disciple. The Message version of the Bible softens it a little bit by saying, anyone who comes to me but refuses to let go of father and mother. It's a little easier to swallow, but the intent of what Jesus is saying is the same. You got to be all in. And to fully really understand Christ's meaning here, you got to look at the Greek word translated hate. And in this version, the original Greek word is miseo, which means to love less. So Christ is essentially saying that anybody who follows him, who makes a commitment to the Christian way of life, must love him more than family, friends, and even life itself. So in essence, this isn't for the faint of heart. He says to his disciples, you're going to face trials. You're going to have challenges in my name. Your allegiance will be tested. The cost of discipleship is high. You got to be all in. I have a friend who's going through one of those kind of dark times in life, where you just think things can't get any worse, and then they do. She's had a really tough time of it. She's watched a very dear friend of hers die. Another friend of hers has got a slow, impending death. She had a health crisis for a child that required them to be in and out of the hospital. She had a job transition. It just kept getting more and more and more piled on in her life. And it's at those times in life, I think, that sometimes we just go, enough, I can't take one more thing. And then we also live in fear of when the next shoe is going to drop. Who's going to bring the next piece of bad news? And that's right where she is. But yet life demands that we stay in the game, that we keep our commitment. As in, the kids still have to eat kind of commitment in her case. And when it comes to our faith in God, when we commit to God, it actually comes with a pretty awesome reward. And that is, if we pick up our cross and follow him, he promises we will not walk in darkness, but we will have the light of life. And that's the kind of light we need in those dark hours. Yes, we promise to be committed, but guess what? So does he. And as Christians, to know that in our darkest hours, that if we're committed, he's even more so all in, that's pretty awesome. But what does that look like? So total commitment to God means that he is our sole authority. He's our beacon of light. He's our perfect compass. And that kind of commitment isn't always easy. Think about it. Even Peter, when pressed about his relationship with Jesus, Denied it 3 times. It's not easy, and we're not perfect. We don't get it right every time. But again, if we can remember, trust, total commitment, requires a great deal of trust. Trust that he's got it all under control. All will be well. It requires intention. We have to set our intention daily to put God first. Remember, he's scanning the world looking for you, to strengthen you and encourage you. And it's a daily intention that we have to undertake. It's effort. We absolutely have to make the effort, whether it's getting out of bed to get here on a Sunday morning, cracking open a Bible once in a while, spending time in daily prayer or meditation. There's effort involved in commitment to God. And there's absolutely sacrifice. It will, without question, require sacrifices both great and small. And there are many examples in the Bible of ordinary people like us making extraordinary sacrifices. Noah, Abraham, Daniel when he was thrown into the lion's den, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego when they refused to bow down to another god and got thrown into the fiery furnace, Mary and Joseph, all the disciples who literally gave their lives to Christ. The list goes on and on of examples that we could look at for sacrifice in the Bible. But our reading today focused on Hannah. Hannah made a promise to God that really, as hard as it is for me to comprehend as a mother what she went through, she offered that child to be raised in complete service to God. She gave her word. She gave her word and she kept it. And I wonder sometimes how many of us, if faced with the same choice, would have done the same thing. So before I wrap up, I want to say that yes, we all have to break our commitments sometimes. Life happens. This is not meant to make anybody feel bad about bailing on lunch with friends because you had an important meeting come up at work. There are also times in life that just require us to re-examine our commitments. Is this commitment still consistent with my values at this point in my life? And I hope you can all see the differences there. But I hope you can also see times and have those times where you wonder to yourself that when I'm bailing on a particular commitment, does that give me pause? Does it make me think twice about what I'm doing? Does it make me think about things like character and integrity and faith? And if you're around young people, I certainly hope that you remember they're watching. They're watching how you handle your commitments in life. But know this, that the Latin form of sacrifice is sacred, or to be made holy. And I wholeheartedly believe that when we fully commit to anything, we are creating something sacred. So I want to end by asking you to consider your own sacrifice when it comes to commitments. Are you all in? Are you committed to parenting? To your friendships? To your marriage? To your core beliefs? To your church community? To your kids' piano lessons? Because if you are truly all in, then that's holy.